Alright, so now I'm ready to do the preview of the 9 games that's going to be happening tomorrow in terms of the penultimate match week of the 2022 regular season, also known as match week number 33. And like what I said in that video where I reviewed the game between Toronto FC versus Inter Miami, I had to make some changes because, that game definitely had some big effect in terms of some of the key points that I've already wrote down when that game was doing on, and I had to kind of make correction after that game definitely affect in terms of some of these teams that are either just above the red line in the Eastern Conference or they're below the red line or on the fringe of potentially getting eliminated. And one of those teams that was coming into tonight still have a small chance of making the playoffs, but now pretty much had no shot of making the playoffs and have been officially eliminated from playoff contention is the New England Revolution. And in some way, I'm kind of disappointed that with tonight's game, this means that this game is really kind of a game where, I was going to just say that, this was a game between the Revs and Atlanta where, both of these teams have some fringe playoff hope and that it is an absolute must-win for both of them or else they're probably going to get eliminated from playoff contention. And it seems like now we know that at least one of the team is eliminated, and that is the Revs with a 9-11-12 record, facing against an Atlanta team with a 10-10-12 record, as this game will start at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 1:38 p.m. local time. And oh, by the way, I believe this is going to be the final week, and hopefully cross our fingers that this is the final week. We're going to have Twitter and 2DN stream heading into next season with the Apple TV deal being kicked off starting next season. But unfortunately, just because this is the final week of potentially Twitter games shown in MLS, doesn't mean Twitter will give us one last very, very bad kind of outgoing in terms of them potentially not coming back next season by basically having to have them have a double header in this one and have to make us suffer twice during what would be the final broadcast, or as I said, hopefully the final broadcast of MLS game being on Twitter. But in terms of the all-time meeting in this one, Atlanta with a 5-3-2 record over New England. As I mentioned, the Revs have already been eliminated from playoff races, and for Atlanta, they will be eliminated if they lose this game against New England and Columbus gets the win against the New York Red Bulls. Or in other words, this is another must-win game for Atlanta. Again, Atlanta, they've started to kind of rediscover their form. Well, I wouldn't say that rediscover their form, but kind of got things going late and are really making a very, very late playoff push to try to get into the playoffs. But again, the odds still are not in their favor, but they're going to try their best in terms of staying alive as we head to decision day, and we'll see if they can get a win in this one, and hope that a lot of team above them will lose so that they can really get themselves back into the race heading into decision day. Now, moving on in the next match. Now, as much as I know there's definitely some playoff six-pointer that is going to happen this week and a lot of playoff implication match, there are some games that, there really isn't a lot of playoff implication and kind of are a bit of a meaningless game, and this is definitely one of them between the Colorado Rapids versus FC Dallas, with this game starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is, actually, I wrote the wrong time. It's actually not 1:55, it's actually 1:50 p.m. local time, as this game is going to be once again on 2DN and Twitter, part of the final, or at least we hope the final Twitter broadcast on MLS this season, and really just forever. But coming into this game, Dallas with a 13-11-8 record, while Colorado with a 10-9-13 record. Dallas have a 39-20-32 all-time record over the Rapids, and again for the Rapids, they were eliminated from playoff contention last week. While for FC Dallas, they can clinch at least one home playoff game with a win or a Galaxy loss versus RSL. So in some way, they still have something to play for. Or if you want to be very optimistic, that you would say that they still have something to play for in terms of that second seed, because technically they're only 5 points back of Austin FC, and if they can get a win and Austin does get a loss, then all of a sudden it's a 2-point gap, and all of a sudden that second spot that looked like it was untouchable for Austin for the majority of the season, now it seems like Dallas could definitely overtake their interstate rival. But obviously I think for the latter part of the season, they're just trying to finish the regular season strong so they can get into good form heading into playoffs. And in some way, they have done that. I mean, they've been very good in the second half of the season and haven't really slowed down too much, and we'll see whether they can continue that against the Colorado Rapids in this game. Now, moving on, we got Charlotte FC versus the Philadelphia Union. So for Charlotte, they're probably that team that is literally on the edge of potentially getting eliminated, with them having a 12-2-17 record, whereas the Union 18-10-4, which is still the best record right now in MLS. As this game will start at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 5:38 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, it's only one prior meeting, which the Union was able to win that. And as I said, for Charlotte, they will be eliminated if they do lose to the Union and Columbus does get a win versus the Red Bulls. And consider the fact that Charlotte has been facing elimination pretty much almost every single week for the past couple of games. It's kind of a miracle that they're still alive in this playoff races. And I said before, even if they are going to be eliminated from the playoffs, which it seems like most likely is going to be the case, you got to give a lot of credit to what Charlotte has done this season, and that, with all the ongoing and off the field situation that has kind of really get this team that can can really easily cripple a team. They're still fighting in a way that they're looking to try and sustain their fight in terms of making the playoffs in their expansion season. But that is something that I don't think Union fans or the Union would really care about, because what they care about is that they want to clinch the CCL berth. So if they can win this game against Charlotte, they will clinch the CCL berth and the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And also if Montreal does lose or draw their matchup, and that, seems like the road to the MLS Cup in the Eastern Conference most likely is going to go through Subaru Park and the Philadelphia Union. And if the Union don't do what they did a couple of years, if they do win the Supporters Shield and just flame out after one round, I would say that this is definitely the team to be favorites to move on to MLS Cup. In fact, you could even say that this could be a team that could be one of the favorites in terms of winning MLS Cup, because the run that they've been on, especially down the stretch, has been something that, they've been unstoppable. Like they are literally like what I saw LAFC a couple of years ago, where they were on another planet in terms of beating teams left and right. And we'll see whether or not if they continue in this game against a Charlotte team that are desperate in terms of trying not to lose this game to stay alive from stay from getting eliminated in this game. Now, moving on in the next match, we got FC Cincinnati versus the Chicago Fire, as this game will be the first of 3 games that's going to be happening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. I mean, in terms of the scheduling for these 9 games, it's actually not too bad. I mean, we do have some overlap there and there, but it seems like there's an even kind of overlap where we get the matinee games. Well, actually, in terms of the matinee games, none of them are going to be overlap, but we get like the busy 7:30 game, and then we got the West Coast game that's going to be happening at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Though, unfortunately, the bad news is the fact that, those games I probably won't be able to watch, because, like I said, I am actually going to be attending one of the game that is going to be happening this match week. In fact, these last 2 weeks, I'm actually going to attend a game, and you probably know which one I'm going to attend, but I'll tell you just in a little bit. But in terms of this one, Cincinnati with a 4-2-2 all-time record over the Chicago Fire. It's one of the rare teams that they actually have done well, because we know that before this year, Cincinnati was definitely a laughingstock in MLS, and that they pretty much have no favorites in terms of the all-time record. But this is one of the teams that they seem to like playing against. It seems to do well. But in terms of the key points in this one for Cincy, they can definitely make history of finally clinching their first ever playoff berth if they can get a win, and hope that their interstate rival Columbus lose or draw their match, or they can win this game and they hope that Orlando will lose or draw at NYCFC. Either way, this team is definitely at a rate where they pretty much have a high percentage of making the playoffs this season. And again, when they do clinch that playoff position, I don't care what Cincinnati do from now on. And in some way, if you want to talk about a dark horse in the Eastern Conference, FC Cincinnati is clearly that one, because this is a team I don't think anyone want to face with the way that Pat Nolan has done so much good to this team. And that, again, if he is able to guide this team to the playoffs and maybe even win a game or two, you gotta say he has to be in serious contention for Coach of the Year this season. But unfortunately, that's not the case for the Chicago Fire because we already talked about them being eliminated from playoff contention. So yeah, this is a good opportunity for Cincinnati to get a win in this game. And recently, their home form has definitely been much better. So maybe that's a good news. But in some way, they do have most likely going to be playing on the road for majority of the playoff game, which is fine because I think Cincinnati this season have been playing much better on the road compared to them playing at home, which is also the reason why I say they're a dark horse because again, you do not want to face a team that knows how to win on the road, and Cincinnati is definitely that team, and they can definitely cause some upset depending on which team that they face. I mean, I look at some of the teams that they could potentially face, teams like Montreal or NYCFC or the two New York team. I can definitely see them getting an upset against those teams too, but we'll see when the matchup of the playoffs is set after next week where exactly FC Cincinnati is going to be playing in the playoff matchup, and that is when they do clinch their playoff position, which I'm assuming it's going to be sooner rather than later. But moving on, in the next match, we now talk about the other Ohio team, which is the Columbus Crew taking on the New York Red Bulls. Now, unfortunately for Columbus, unlike their interstate rival FC Cincinnati, their playoff picture is definitely not confirmed. In fact, they're still in that battle in terms of trying to get into the playoffs and trying to get above the red line. If they are able to try to do that, they have to face another good team, and this time in the New York Red Bulls with a 14-8-10 record. All-time meeting, it's a 38-13-33 record in favor of the New York Red Bulls. Actually, I should have changed this to CLB and not COL because I use COL for Colorado and I use CLB for the Crew. But speaking of the Crew, key points coming into this game. They're currently 3 points behind Miami, and again, I changed that because originally I said they're actually tied with Miami, but now with Miami getting that big win, they're now 3 points back. But the good news is they do have that game in hand, and that game in hand is basically this one, and that if they can get a win in this one, then they definitely put pressure on Miami and certainly some of the teams that are just barely hanging on in terms of the red line. But here's the problem. They need to get a win, and that's been hard to come by in Columbus this season, especially with the way that, again, this has been a team that looks like the 2020 Portland Timbers side, where they just keep blowing leads left and right every single game. But for the New York Red Bulls, or actually, I'm not going to say the 2020 Portland Timbers. I'll say more like the 2019 Portland Timbers. Well, actually, the 2020 Portland Timbers also blown a lot of leads, but yeah, again, this team is definitely on that verge of doing that, with them just having a really tough time in terms of closing out games and have given up the most goal in the final 15 minutes of the game. Now, for the New York Red Bulls, they can clinch at least one home playoff game with a win in this one. And like I said, for the Red Bulls, it's kind of weird to say this, but in some way, I don't think they would be happy that they want to play a home playoff game, mainly because, they don't have a good record at home this season. They have a much stronger record on the road, but I guess that's kind of the peculiar cases where sometimes you're just so good on the road and maybe just do enough at home, you do get that home playoff game. But, this is a chance for them to show why they are one of the best team this season on the road, and especially against a Columbus team that have struggled to get home resort. Could be cases where they can definitely get a win in this one, and I'm pretty sure all the other team around the Eastern Conference playoff picture are hoping that is the case. But now moving on in the next match, and another matchup that is kind of a bit meaningless, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about, which is Montreal versus DC United. And yes, I know Montreal technically still are in the Supporters' Shield race, but let's be honest, unless if both LAFC and Philly basically just collapse in the last two games and Montreal basically win out, I think they're pretty much most likely going to finish second place. In fact, I even said it, they pretty much clinch second place with just a slim chance of getting that first position and potentially winning the Supporters' Shield. But either way, Wilfred Nancy team is 18-5-9, while DC United is 7-6-19. And again, another reason why this is kind of meaningless is DC have already been eliminated from playoff contention. In fact, they were one of the first team to get eliminated from playoff contention. All-time meeting, it's a 9-8-8 record that Montreal has. And again, I think the only thing that Montreal would like to do in this game is to get wins. Because again, even though you don't have a lot to play for down the stretch, that's always something that could be very, very tricky for a head coach, where you probably know that you're going to be in this position in the playoffs, and you can't go up or down as the season goes along. That you do have to make some tricky decision of whether or not maybe you might rest some guys, or maybe you still play the full squad. Like for me, I feel like they should just keep playing the full squad. Yes, I know there's that risk of injuries, but at the same time, if you decided to not put your starter for the remaining of the schedule, and if you go through a bit of a cold streak, then that can also be a psychological mindset where you don't want to head into the playoffs in a cold run. I mean, a great example was last season, where remember when the New England Revolution won the Supporters Shield and they had that 24-day rest, which, as I said, as much as it definitely benefits them for not playing games, it also kind of harmed them in big ways, where 24 days is a long time between games and can really build up a rust and the match sharpness for those players. And it was not a big surprise that was a key factor when they lost to NYCFC, and hence that's also the reason why this season, in terms of the playoff schedule, we're not going to see that happen, where the team that won the Supporters Shield is going to have like 24 days to prep for the next game. But yeah, again, as I said, in this case, you want to still play your best player, because you want them to get into a confident level where once playoff time goes, then they can definitely start to do well, and we'll see whether or not if Montreal and Wilfried Nancy is going to continue to do that. Especially, maybe one of the reasons why he might not want to do that is because he's been suffering some injuries in terms of some of his most important player, and he might be hesitate to really play them, and that they may be suffer some injuries doing these meaningless game, and that could take a huge blow in terms of Montreal chances of potentially going deep in the playoffs this season. But that being said, I am now going to change boards and look at the last 3 games that's going to finish off in terms of the Saturday action of match week number 33. So moving on, in the next match is none other than the Blues Knot Derby, and the game that I am going to be going between the San Jose Earthquakes versus Minnesota United, as this game will start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. Now, obviously, with the fact that the Quakes did not help anybody in the Western Conference race after losing to the Galaxy. Well, maybe besides the Galaxy, because now all of a sudden, as I'll talk about how they're now in a very good position of clinching a playoff position this week. Definitely does not help the case with all these teams, and especially for Minnesota United, that all of a sudden now they find themselves in that dreaded 7th spot, and that spot that, yeah, you definitely don't want to be there. Consider there's going to be a lot of hungry team below them that are trying to chase for those playoff position. Now, in terms of the all-time meeting, it's pretty even, 5-2 and 5. I remember in the early days between both of these teams in the Blues Knot Derby, the Quakes always dominated, and then all of a sudden Minnesota started to dominate this meeting, and all of a sudden it started to kind of become a bit of a stalemate, with both of these teams getting a couple of draws with occasional win from the Loons. Now, if they do get a draw in this game, it won't be the worst result in the world, because if they get a draw in this game, and I believe even if RSL does get a win against the Galaxy, they would be tied on points with RSL, but they still have the tiebreaker over them because of wins. But that also means that now it can get to the final day of the season, and that Vancouver could still be in the race for it. Oh boy, I am definitely not looking forward to attending that last game of the season when the Loons play against the Vancouver Whitecaps, which, newsflash for you, I'm actually going to be going to that last game at Allianz Field. And that was supposed to be a game I thought I was going to be having some enjoyment of, going to my first ever Minnesota United game. And yes, I'm going to my first Minnesota United game at Allianz Field. That All-Star game that I went back in August does not count, because Minnesota United was not involved, even if there are a couple of players that was playing for the MLS All-Star. But yeah, that game will definitely be an anxiety. The game that I have not felt since 2017, when we had that Blues Knot Derby, and how the Quakes just sneaked into the playoffs on the final day of the season. But if the Loons can spare me from that kind of anxiety, all they need to do here is they need to get a win against the Quakes, and hope that RSL lose or draw against the Galaxy, or hope that the Timbers also lose or draw versus LAFC. I mean, the easy ways to do it in this one, and at least get themselves in a very good position heading into the final day is simply win against the Quakes. But like I said, as much as I know the Quakes got absolutely destroyed in that game against the Galaxy, and I mentioned how that was such an embarrassing performance, I don't have a lot of faith that the Loons can pull 3 points. In fact, I'm even saying that I'm prepared to get hurt, and I'm prepared to get disappointed, because if you look at the way that the Loons has been playing lately, it does not give me a lot of confidence that this team can get maybe another wins to really get them clinch the playoff position. And the only good news I will say is that, at least they have their decision day game at home, and at least for most part this season they've been doing very good at home. And the other good news is at least the Loons will have most of their front three back with Fragapane, Reynoso, and also Amaria back, and hopefully Robin Love will also be back in that midfield. And if that's the case, then that's pretty much the healthiest attack we have seen this team has had in the past couple of weeks. And the only thing that is truly missing is that defense, which we won't talk about that. We just hope that maybe that defense will just do enough and that attack can do enough to get a win. But yeah, this is a big game for the Loons. This is a big Blues not derby, almost a reminiscent to what happened in 2017. But now things have now been flipped. It's now Minnesota the one that could be in some have some playoff implication that they need to get a win so that they can get themselves either in or get themselves set up on decision day. Whereas in 2017 that was literally the time when the Quakes had to win if they want to clinch the playoffs, which they did in dramatic fashion. But now moving on in the next match, we got the Vancouver Whitecaps versus Austin FC. So Vancouver, believe it or not, they're still alive in the playoff races. Like the Vancouver Whitecaps, I feel like they kind of remind me of the Colorado Rapids a couple of years ago. Remember, I think during that pandemic year that, or actually not the pandemic year, but I think in 2019, when they seems like they were going to be eliminated a long time ago, and then they just keep staying alive with wins down the stretch, and it just gets to a point where they actually didn't get eliminated until the final day of the season. That seems like it's the case for the Vancouver Whitecaps, because again, this team looked like they were dead in the water a couple of weeks ago. Like after that loss against Colorado, where I thought that was the game that really decided whether or not if one of these teams was going to make the playoffs, and whoever loses most likely will be eliminated. Well, after that game, it seems like, the Colorado Rapids, who won that game, is eliminated. The Whitecaps are somehow still alive. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've been very good at home this season. And they get to play at home in this one against an Austin FC side that, yes, it's not going to be easy for Vancouver to get a win against Austin. But again, just like the case I talked about with Montreal, I'm wondering would Josh Wolf maybe rest some of his guys, because Austin have pretty much clinched that second spot. And while, yes, technically they haven't clinched because Dallas can technically still catch them, I'm going to assume they're pretty much getting to that point. And especially, you can also say that Austin hasn't really been in the best of form to head into the playoffs. Maybe that might be another reason why Josh Wolf maybe won't sit some of his guys. But one thing we know for sure is Vanni Sartini is not going to sit any of his guys, because again, they're fighting for their playoff life. They need to get a win in this game. A lose or a draw against Austin will not do it. And if the Galaxy does get a win or a draw, and the Portland Timbers get a win and a draw, and if Minnesota gets a win against the Quakes, they also will be eliminated, no matter what this result is going to be. But again, this is something about this team. I have a feeling it's going to come down to the final day. Like I think they are going to get a win in this one, because again, they've been facing their backs against the wall for the past couple of weeks, and they just keep coming with clutch wins or clutch resort, or other resort kind of really benefit them to not officially be eliminated, and who say that's not going to happen again in this match, even if they are going to be facing against a really good Austin side. And now finally moving on into the last game of the Saturday action of this penultimate match week of the MLS regular season. We go to probably one of the games that a lot of people will be watching in the Western Conference race for the playoffs, and a game that I've mentioned before. This is definitely an ultimate playoff six-pointer. It's the LA Galaxy versus RSL. The reason why I say it's an ultimate six-pointer, well, it maybe isn't as ultimate as it was if the Galaxy didn't get that win against the Quakes. Like, if they didn't get that win, then yeah, this would have been really a big playoff six-pointer with one team being 7th and one team being 8th. But now the Galaxy have jumped up to 5th place. Though again, they're technically aren't clinch yet, unless they can get a win or a draw in this game against RSL with a 13-7 and 12 record. And by the way, this game will start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time, with the Galaxy having a 23-12 and 19 record. But for RSL, they technically are going to be in the elimination in this one, though they definitely have if they are going to be eliminated, a couple of things will need to happen. First, they need to lose this game, and that the Timbers will get a win or a draw. And actually, it's not at the Quakes. They're supposed to play against LAFC. Let me just change that real quick. Or actually, just pretend that it says that they're playing at LAFC. And then there's also this crazy scenario where they have to rely on teams that is above the red line to win, and then they of course get eliminated. But either way, as long as they don't lose this game, then they would, I think they would still be alive heading into decision day. But like I said, they kind of put themselves in this spot, and this is why I said a couple of weeks ago, when they throw away that game against Austin FC, when they decided to punt that game, and Pablo Mastroeni decided to start a weak squad in the midst of a playoff race, I thought that was a big mistake. And I thought that was a mistake that, he clearly did not learn from Adrian Heath a couple of weeks ago, and now they find themselves in a spot where, not only they don't control their playoff destiny, but they need to win these games. And unfortunately for RSL, with the form that they've been on lately, it doesn't seem like that would be the case. But I will say this: there's one thing you know about this RSL team, and just like their anthem, you can't just count this team out. Like last season, we thought this team was dead and buried. Especially, I remember after they lost to the Portland Timbers last year, we thought they were dead and buried. And when they have to go on the road to Sporting KC, a place that they have not had a lot of success, and yet somehow Damir Krylak happened in that, and they sneak into the playoffs on the final day. So who can't say that this team is not going to pull off some crazy magic in these final couple of weeks, and that they can definitely go on the road to be able to get a win against the Galaxy. And especially for the Galaxy, again, yes, that win against the Quakes was definitely a big victory to get themselves closer to a playoffs. And like I said, they only need to get a draw in this one to get to that point. But the problem with the Galaxy this season is that consistency hasn't really been a thing for this team, at least in the second half of the season. I mean, they have definitely been much better in the last couple of games, but again, it just feels like you just simply think that they're going to find ways to shoot themselves in the foot. And I'm pretty sure Galaxy fans will know that too well too, with the way that they've seen so many heartbreaks in decision day and down the stretch, that don't be surprised that they might not pull off a return, and especially against an RSL team that is hungry to get 3 points, that is in must-win territory. They cannot slack off in this game. They need to be back in the level that they were in that game against the Quakes in the Cali Clasico, and if they can do that, then they will make the playoffs. But it's going to be a very interesting matchup, and a matchup that, again, a lot of teams in the Western Conference will be keeping an eye on, and a lot of those teams that is in the playoff bubble are trying to keep an eye on. Like, ideally, a lot of those teams will just hope that this game ends in a draw, and that they can pick up points on both of these teams. But we'll see who is going to get that crucial win to really get themselves in a really good position, or at least set themselves in a good position of making the playoffs on decision day. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my preview of not all six, but these 9 games that's going to be happening tomorrow. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction for these 9 games that's going to be happening tomorrow. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and I of course will see you guys next time.